The day I chose my wife over my own son began with a missed phone call. At the time, I thought it was nothing. By the end of that week, my wife would be gone from our home. My son would be making decisions that were never his to make, and I would discover that some betrayals don't happen overnight. They happen one small step at a time until you're standing in the middle of them. What I didn't know then was that before this was over, someone was going to lose everything they thought they controlled. Let me take you back to how it all started. My name is Harold Mitchell. I'm 71 years old, retired, and for most of my life, I believed that if you worked hard and took care of your family, everything else would eventually fall into place. For 40 years, I ran a construction company that started with one truck and a handful of employees. There were years when I worked 7 days a week. Years when vacations didn't exist. Years when every dollar went back into the business. But I never regretted it, because every sacrifice had a purpose. My wife, Evelyn, was that purpose. We had been married for 46 years. She stood beside me when the company barely survived its first year and celebrated with me when it finally succeeded. If I built the business, she built the family. Over the last year, Evelyn had started experiencing mild memory problems. Nothing severe. She occasionally misplaced her keys or forgot the name of a restaurant we'd visited before. The doctors told us it was common at her age. She was still independent, still intelligent, still very much herself. Our son Daniel, however, seemed increasingly concerned. At first, I appreciated it. He called often. He helped schedule appointments. He offered to organize paperwork. Most parents would have been grateful to have a son that involved. I certainly was. Looking back now, that's probably why I missed the warning signs. The first one came during a Sunday dinner. Evelyn was telling our granddaughter a story about a camping trip we'd taken years. I go on halfway through the story, Daniel interrupted. "Mom, that's not how it happened." Evelyn smiled. "I think it is." Daniel laughed. "No, Dad drove the RV the whole trip. You always forget that part." Everyone chuckled politely. The conversation moved on. But I noticed something. Evelyn stopped talking. It seemed insignificant, a tiny moment, the kind of thing most people wouldn't remember. But similar moments kept happening. Whenever someone asked Evelyn a question, Daniel answered first. Whenever she expressed an opinion, he corrected something. Whenever she forgot a small detail, he treated it like evidence. One afternoon, my sister asked Evelyn whether she was still volunteering at the community center. Before Evelyn could respond, Daniel jumped in. "We're probably slowing down some of those activities," I frowned. "We are?" Daniel turned toward me. "It might be best." Evelyn looked confused. "I wasn't planning on stopping." Daniel sighed dramatically. "Mom, sometimes you don't realize when things are becoming difficult." The table went quiet. I looked at my wife. She stared down at her plate, embarrassed. That bothered me. "She can decide that herself," I said. Daniel gave me a patient smile, the kind people use when speaking to someone they think doesn't understand. "Dad, we're just being realistic." For some reason, those words stayed with me. Not because they were harsh, because they felt dismissive, as if our opinions no longer mattered. After that, I started noticing other things. Daniel was becoming involved in every decision: medical appointments, insurance paperwork, financial reviews, conversations with specialists. At first, I thought he was helping. Then I realized he was slowly becoming the person everyone consulted first, even me. One evening, Evelyn mentioned signing paperwork at a doctor's office. I looked up immediately. "What paperwork?" She shrugged. "I'm not sure." "What do you mean you're not sure?" Daniel said it was routine. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. The next day I called Daniel. "What paperwork did Mom sign?" "It's nothing important." "If it's not important, why wasn't I told?" He laughed softly. "Dad, not every form requires a family discussion." I didn't like his answer. More importantly, I didn't like how quickly he dismissed the question. Still, I let it go. That's the thing about trust. When you've trusted someone for 46 years of your life, you don't immediately assume they're working against you. You give them the benefit of the doubt, again and again. By Thanksgiving, things had changed even more. Relatives were starting to treat Daniel like the family authority. At dinner, I overheard a conversation between my sister and Daniel. They were discussing long-term care plans for me, for Evelyn, for our future. I was standing 10 feet away. Neither of them thought to include me. When I confronted Daniel later, he seemed annoyed. I'm trying to help. I didn't ask for help. You need it. The words hit harder than he probably intended. Not because they were cruel, because they sounded genuine. Daniel honestly believed he should be making decisions instead of me. That realization sat heavily in my mind. Then Christmas arrived, and with it came another change. Every time Daniel visited, he brought information, brochures, facility guides, care programs, retirement communities, assisted living options. At first, it was occasional, then it became constant. Every conversation somehow led back to the same subject: future care, future planning, future control. One evening, I finally stopped pretending not to notice. Evelyn isn't moving anywhere. Daniel looked surprised. Never said she was. You bring it up every week. I'm just preparing for possibilities. No, I replied quietly. You're pushing for something. For a brief moment, irritation crossed his face. Then it disappeared. Dad, he said calmly, you're being emotional. That word bothered me more than anything else. Emotional, not concerned, not protective. Emotional. As though loving my wife somehow disqualified me from looking out for her. From that day forward, something changed between us. I couldn't quite explain it, but for the first time in my life, I began wondering whether my son was helping us or positioning himself for something else. And that question would soon change everything. A few weeks later, I left town for a weekend to visit an old friend from the construction business. He had recently suffered a minor stroke, and I wanted to spend some time with him. Before I left, Evelyn kissed me on the cheek and told me not to worry. I'll be fine for 2 days. Harold, I smiled. I know you will. At the time, I believed it. Saturday passed normally. We spoke on the phone that evening, and she sounded exactly like herself. We talked about the weather, our granddaughter's school project, and whether I remembered to pack my blood pressure medication. It was an ordinary conversation. The kind of conversation you never imagine might be the last normal one for a long time. Sunday afternoon, I tried calling her again. No answer. I wasn't concerned. Evelyn often left her phone in another room. An hour later, I called again, still nothing, then again and again. 4 missed calls. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Not fear. Something quieter. Something worse. I called Daniel. He answered immediately. Hey, Dad, have you talked to your mother today? There was a pause, just long enough to make me uncomfortable. Then he said, maybe we should talk when you get home. I sat upright. What happened? Another pause. Mom's okay. The moment he said that, my heart dropped. People only start conversations like that when something is wrong. I ended the call and started driving home. The entire trip felt longer than it should have. My mind kept jumping from one possibility to another. Had she fallen? Was she in the hospital? Had there been an accident? By the time I pulled into my driveway, Daniel's car was already parked outside, waiting. I stepped inside the house. The silence hit me immediately. For 46 years, Evelyn's presence had filled every room. The television was usually on. Music played softly in the kitchen. There was always some sign she was nearby. Now, there was nothing. Then, I noticed her favorite chair, empty. Daniel was standing in the living room with his hands folded, almost like he had prepared for this conversation. I looked around. Where's your mother? He took a slow breath. She's safe. Where is she? His eyes didn't leave mine. We moved her yesterday. For a second, I genuinely didn't understand what he meant. Moved her where? To Maple Grove Assisted Living. The room seemed to go completely still. What? Dad, listen. No. I took a step forward. What did you just say? Daniel tried to remain calm. The doctors agreed it was the best decision. The doctors? I said. What doctors? The specialists we've been consulting. We? The word came out sharper than I intended. Daniel looked away, briefly, We've been discussing this for months. Months. Without me. I felt something cold settle inside my chest. You're telling me my wife was moved into a nursing facility while I was out of town? It's not a nursing home. I don't care what you call it. His jaw tightened. Dad, someone had to make a decision. I stared at him. For 71 years, I had experienced business disputes, lawsuits, financial crises, and personal losses, but nothing had prepared me for hearing my own son say those words. Someone had to make a decision. As if I no longer mattered. As if Evelyn's husband of 46 years had become irrelevant. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a betrayal. I didn't answer him. Not right away. Because I knew that if I spoke while I was angry, I would say something neither of us could ever take back. Instead, I walked past him. Straight into our bedroom. Half of Evelyn's closet was empty. Her favorite blue sweater was gone. Her reading glasses weren't on the nightstand. Even the framed photo of us at our 40th anniversary had disappeared. Someone hadn't just moved my wife. They had packed her life without me. I slowly turned back toward Daniel. Who packed her things? He hesitated. I did. You? I had help. From who? My wife. And the staff. The staff. They had entered my home while I was hundreds of miles away. They had boxed up 46 years of marriage like it was another moving job. I picked up one of Evelyn's scarves that had been left behind. It still smelled like her perfume. My hands started shaking, not from weakness, from disbelief. You planned this. Dad, answer me. Yes. For how long? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. A few months. A few months. I repeated the words quietly. Every doctor's appointment, every conversation, every brochure, every time he said he was only trying to help. It had all been leading here. You waited until I left town. It was easier. I looked at him. Easier for who? He didn't answer, because there wasn't a good answer. If I had been here, I continued, this never would have happened. He finally nodded. No. So you knew I'd stop you. We knew you'd make it emotional. There was that word again. Emotional. As if love was a flaw, as if protecting my wife was irrational. I grabbed my car keys. Where are you going? To get my wife. He stepped into my path. Dad, visiting hours are almost over. I stared at him, then I gently moved him aside. I'm not visiting. I'm bringing her home. Maple Grove Assisted Living sat 20 minutes away. The building was clean, beautiful landscaping, fresh paint, a fountain near the entrance. Anyone driving by would think it looked peaceful, but to me, it looked like a prison. Inside, the receptionist smiled politely. Can I help you? My wife is Evelyn Mitchell. She typed something into her computer. Oh yes, she smiled again. Mrs. Mitchell just arrived yesterday. Just arrived, like luggage. I'd like to see her. Of course. A nurse led me down a long hallway. Every room looked the same. Doors half open, televisions playing, residents staring quietly through windows. Some looked confused. Some looked lonely. Some looked completely forgotten. The nurse stopped outside room 214. She's inside. I opened the door. Evelyn was sitting beside the window, still wearing the same cardigan she'd worn when I left 2 days earlier. A single suitcase rested beside the bed. She looked up. For a second, she simply stared. Then tears filled her eyes. Harold. I crossed the room in 3 steps. She stood. We held each other without saying a word. 46 years together. And somehow that hug said everything. After a long moment, I whispered, I'm so sorry. She pulled back. I thought you knew. Those 6 words hit me harder than anything Daniel had said. You thought? She nodded. Daniel told me you agreed. My heart stopped. What? He said. You didn't want to upset me before your trip. I couldn't breathe. He said we had both decided this was temporary. I slowly shook my head. Evelyn, I never agreed to this. She looked completely lost. You didn't? No. Then, why am I here? Neither of us spoke, because neither of us understood how our own son could lie to both of us. The administrator soon joined us. She introduced herself professionally. I'm Karen, the facility director. I stood. I'll be taking my wife home. Her smile faded. I'm afraid it isn't that simple. It is exactly that simple. She opened a folder. Your son presented legal authorization. I frowned. What authorization? Medical power of attorney. Every word felt heavier than the last. I never signed one. It wasn't yours. She looked at Evelyn. It was hers. I turned slowly. Evelyn looked just as confused. I signed papers at the clinic, she whispered. I thought they were insurance forms. The room became silent. The administrator looked uncomfortable. I'm sure your son explained everything. He explained nothing. Karen glanced down at the documents again. The paperwork appears valid. Appears. That single word stayed with me. Appears. Not confirmed. Not verified. Appears. I looked directly at her. Did anyone ask whether she understood what she signed? Karen hesitated. I wasn't present. Did anyone ask if her husband knew? Another pause. No. I nodded once. Then I looked back at Evelyn. Pack your suitcase. Karen immediately stepped forward. Sir, I don't think... I interrupted her calmly. I'm not creating a scene. I reached into my wallet, pulled out my business card. Although I had retired years earlier, one title remained beneath my name. Founder, Mitchell Construction Group. I handed it to her. I've negotiated contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I've spent 40 years reading legal documents, and I promise you, if those papers were signed under false pretenses, they won't survive the week. Karen's expression changed. She realized this wasn't an angry old man refusing to accept reality. This was someone who intended to investigate every signature, every witness, every conversation, every date. She quietly excused herself. 10 minutes later, she returned. We've contacted our legal department, and they recommend allowing Mrs. Mitchell to leave voluntarily if she wishes. I looked at Evelyn. What do you want? She didn't hesitate. I want to go home. Those 5 words ended the discussion. The drive home was almost silent. Not because we had nothing to say, because there was too much. Halfway there, Evelyn finally spoke. I kept thinking, if Harold agreed, maybe I really was becoming a burden. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. You have never been a burden. Not one day. She smiled sadly. I started believing them. That sentence broke something inside me, not because of what she believed, because someone had worked very hard to make her believe it. By the time we pulled into our driveway, the porch lights were on. Daniel was standing outside waiting. He watched as I helped Evelyn out of the car. His face turned pale. Dad. I looked him directly in the eyes. No. He froze. You don't get to speak. Not tonight. Tonight, you get to listen.